looking at her computer screen, but not really seeing it. Her once promising career as a graphic designer felt like a distant dream. What had once been a creative outlet that she poured herself into now felt like a suffocating obligation. The vibrant ideas she used to come up with had been replaced by a fog of doubt. Her boss, Mr. Thomas, had stopped asking for her input in meetings. Her colleagues seemed to notice her lack of enthusiasm, but avoided addressing it, unsure how to interact with her. The noise of the office faded into the background, and Emma's thoughts took her back to the day of the accident. She was driving home from a meeting when a truck had swerved into her lane. The crash had left her with broken ribs, a shattered arm, and months of physical therapy. But the true damage hadn't been visible. It was in the emptiness she felt, inside the hollow pit that consumed her. Her thoughts. How can I be happy again? What's the point of trying? As her mind spiraled, she was jolted out of her reverie by her phone buzzing. It was a message from Sarah, an old friend she had lost touch with after the accident. Sarah had been one of the first people to visit, her in the hospital, and the two of them had shared countless memories during their college years. But Emma had pushed everyone away, and even Sarah hadn't been able to break through. Text from Sarah. Hey Emma, I know things have been tough for you lately. I'm starting a support group for personal growth. Just a small group of people who want to help each other heal. No pressure. But I thought you might want to join us. I believe it could help. Let me know if you're interested. Emma stared at the text. Help? She thought. What could a group of strangers do for me? But something stirred inside her, a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, she could find a way to stop feeling like a shell. The soft whir of the office printer cut through, the silence as Emma sat at her desk, staring at the screen. She had been trying to focus for hours, but her mind kept drifting. Thoughts of the support group swirled in her head. Sarah's gentle encouragement, the idea of opening up to strangers, and the question of whether it would really work. What if she wasn't ready? What if she failed again? Her boss, Mr. Thomas, walked by and gave her a quick nod. His face was neutral, but Emma could see the subtle signs that he was worried. She hadn't been the same since the accident. The fire that had once burned inside her seemed to have gone out, and her work was a reflection of that. She tried to focus on a project, but the screen before her became a blur. The color palette she was trying to choose felt off. Nothing looked right. Her hands began to shake as she grabbed her coffee mug. Her mind raced through 1,000 scenarios, none of which were good. What if she couldn't get back to the way she was? What if this is my life now? Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of her phone buzzing on the desk. It was a message from Sarah, text from Sarah. Hey, I just wanted to check in. The group meets tonight at 7 p.m. I'd love to see you there if you feel up to it. No pressure, just thought I'd remind you. You're not alone in this. Emma's breath caught in her throat. Not alone in this. How long had she felt completely isolated? Even when she was surrounded by people, she had never felt more alone. But this was different. Sarah was reaching out in a way that felt real, without pity, without judgment. She felt like someone understood. For the first time, in a long time, she decided to take a step. Chapter 2. The turning point one evening. Emma decides to take a walk, something she hasn't done in months. As she stumbles down the street, she notices a flyer for a community support group focused on personal growth. The idea seems ridiculous, at first. Who needs support, she thinks. I'm fine, I'm just tired. But deep down, she knows she's not. She hesitates, but after a long internal battle, she takes the flyer. The next day, she shows up to the meeting. The room is small, filled with people from different walks of life, each one carrying their own burdens. The leader of the group, Sarah, a woman in her 40s, is warm and welcoming. Sarah's story resonates deeply with Emma. She too had gone through a life-altering accident, one that changed her physically and emotionally. But Sarah had rebuilt her life. She shares her story with the group, and for the first time in a long time, Emma feels a spark of hope. Emma stood hesitantly in front of the door of the community center. The flyer she had picked up earlier that day seemed so insignificant, yet now it felt like a lifeline. Her palms were clammy, her heart racing with both excitement and fear. She hadn't left her apartment for anything other than work in months. Taking a deep breath, Emma opened the door. The room was small, filled, with mismatched chairs arranged in a circle. The hum of quiet conversation stopped as the group turned to look at her. The leader of the group, a woman in her early 40s named Sarah, smiled warmly at her. "Hi, I'm Sarah," she said, her voice soft yet confident. "I'm really glad you could make it." Emma gave a weak smile in return. She had always been good at pretending to be okay, but the weight of her own pain was too much to hide. She sank into an empty chair, unsure of what to expect. Over the next hour, each person took a turn sharing their story. Some were about loss, some about addiction, and some about personal struggles Emma had never experienced, but she could relate to all of them. Each story, each tear, each small victory shared by the others, began to unravel something inside of her. Then, Sarah spoke. "I know it's hard to believe, but I've been where you are. I was in a terrible accident. It took everything I had to rebuild myself. It's not easy, but it's possible." Emma's heart raced. Could she too rebuild herself? Emma's life didn't change overnight, but every small action she took seemed to have a ripple effect. She began waking up earlier, pushing herself to get out of bed even when it felt like her body was made of lead. She walked around her block each morning, even if only for 10 minutes. It wasn't much, but it was something. Every evening, she journaled about her thoughts, things she had never dared to write down before. She finally faced the pain she had been running from for so long. In one of her journal entries, she wrote, "I am not defined by my accident. I am not my scars. I am still me. Only, I'm learning to be stronger." The first few days after the group meeting were difficult. Emma found herself questioning every small change she made. Her daily walks were short and unremarkable, but every step felt like an accomplishment. The fog that had clouded her mind for so long started to lift, even if just a little. She woke up earlier, made her bed, cooked a meal. Small things, but they were victories. Each evening, she returned to her journal, pouring her heart out. The words didn't always come easily, but as she wrote, something began to shift inside her. She was learning to be honest with herself. The invitation to speak at the conference came as a shock. The thought of standing in front of an audience, telling her story, terrified her. What if she froze? What if she stumbled over her words? But deep down, Emma knew this was her moment. The woman she was becoming, the one who had learned to embrace her flaws and failures, was not afraid to speak her truth. The night before the conference, she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Her heart pounded, and her mind raced with doubts. What if I'm not enough? She thought. Then she remembered the first day she walked into the support group. How small she had felt then, how broken. And yet, she had continued to show up. She could do this. Emma stood in front of a crowd of strangers. The spotlight felt hot on her face. Her heart was racing, but as she began to speak, a calmness washed over her. She told them her story, the pain, the grief, and the small victories she had fought for. The audience was captivated. and Emma realized that sharing her truth was not only empowering for her, it was helping others too. When she finished, there was a pause, and then the room erupted into applause. Emma blinked back tears, a mixture of pride and relief filling her chest. She had done it. A year had passed since that first step into the support group. Emma stood in front of the mirror, looking at the woman who had emerged from the darkness. She no longer saw someone broken. She saw someone whole, someone who had faced the storm and come out stronger. Her life wasn't perfect. She still had days when the weight of the past crept back in, but she had learned how to navigate those days. She had learned to trust herself again. As she stepped outside, the sun kissed her face, and for the first time in a long time, she felt ready for whatever came next. She smiled, not because everything was easy, but because she knew she had the strength to face it all. The invitation to speak at the conference came as a shock.